My name is Ben Livingston. I'm the first person to ever see the cloud with the intention to cause it to do military damage. I know I can say that, and I did it several times before the next person did it. We were doing quite a lot of testing work out over the test range at China Lake, California, where we dropped cloud seeding flares or silver iodide generators into clouds, or just where we wanted to see what the reaction was. And it was there when I learned for sure that you could really change a cloud by the amount of silver iodide you put in it and where you put it. By 1969, we had all the latest state-of-the-art equipment in a number of airplanes, and we also had aircraft equipped with dispensing equipment to put silver iodide into a hurricane. The hypothesis for how to do this had been developed by Dr. Joanne Simpson, and her husband, Dr. Robert Simpson, was the director of Project Storm Fury for a number of years. And we followed her hypothesis, which said that if you seed enough clouds in the right front quadrant of a hurricane where the energy cells are, you may build a second eye, or at the minimum make this original eye much bigger.
This is not something that you can do much about, you just have to roll with it.
That's unbelievable! Oh, NASA's playing God.
My main contribution at Corona was to write a plan for weather modification control for the whole world at any given time. We could send a number of airplanes with the materials and dispensing equipment we had, and probably control the weather all the way around the world.
This is really the official start of the modern era of weather modification. Vincent Schaefer, Irving Langmuir, and Bernard Vonnegut. On the left there you can see Vincent Schaefer, and on the right you can see Vincent Schaefer breathing in a freezer. That is how cloud seeding was invented. You cannot make that up. So less than a year later, they tried to steer a hurricane with it. Project Cirrus was those three scientists you just saw were from General Electric. They got with the Weather Bureau and they went out and seeded a tropical storm, which then turned into a hurricane, which changed colors, 120-degree turn, slammed into Savannah, and doing $3 million worth of damage.
Struggling to recover his valuables from a river in which he
wreaked havoc through areas of KwaZulu-Natal, causing damage to buildings and flooding roads.
"100 years ago, there was a guy named Charles Mallory Hadfield. He was known as the moisture accelerator. He mixed chemicals in vats and he burned them to make rain. Back then it was called rain-making or pluviculture. Now, he was contracted by the city of San Diego to make it rain. They told him they'd pay him $10,000 to do it, and he did it. The problem is he did $3.5 million worth of flooding damage, and unless he assumed liability for all of that, he never got paid.
Weather patterns are extreme, and I'm afraid Cape Town has taken a pummeling these last 24 hours.
Moscow is clearing up after what's being called the worst storm here in 100 years.
The hurricane, reaching up to 80 kilometers per hour, was the deadliest.
In the storm that brought high winds, hail and heavy rain, the BBC noted reports of winds up to 70 miles per hour.
With long, cold winters, Moscow is used to harsh weather, but it's not used to this.
The thing that's also we should realize, the number of natural disasters that we've had and natural challenges that the world's faced has actually increased at a significantly higher rate. There has been a change.
You take a cloud that Mother Nature or God has provided, and you alter that cloud. Well, the reason the cloud doesn't expand on its own in most cases is the fact that there's a lot of moisture, but there's no nuclei. There's nothing for the moisture to stick to. So when you provide the silver iodide nuclei, it causes the water to coalesce to that nuclei, and when it does, it releases heat, which means everything starts to rise. If you produce enough nuclei at the right places in a cloud, there's essentially no limit to how fast and how far it'll grow, because it just keeps releasing heat as it goes up, and of course the heat keeps trying to rise.
Now, this is a map from 52 of 65 of all of the different cloud seeding projects. 1958, did you know that in Palm Springs, planes were clouding the sky and blocking out the sun? Today we call this chemtrails euphemistically online, is the general term that they like to call it, but in 1958, they said that an exuberant mob of skyriders were blocking out the sun. They were dropping carbon black dust suspended in liquid, creating clouds. Now, our previous speaker spoke about soot. That's the other term for carbon black dust. So they were putting carbon black dust in the sky, making clouds, and destroying them with a driver.
Taken these images of Somalia in the 1980s would show a country lush with life.
In my 45 years, I've never seen this kind of a drought. It's the worst one.
Sending floodwater cascading through towns and villages in southwestern Sri Lanka.
And Cyclone Mora showed it no mercy when it hit southeast Bangladesh.
We are used to rains and flooding in our area, but this year it has been unusual. We have never experienced such floods in 70 years.
Death and destruction on a scale not seen.
In a cruel twist, the land which just weeks ago was cracking with drought is now dangerously unstable.
Now they modify the weather, so also started modifying space. Now, they don't like the ionosphere because it's unpredictable. And unpredictable is not cool for operations, so why don't we create an artificial ionosphere by putting 480 million needles in space? Some of them are still up there, the rest are in the North Pole and the ice. NOAA then had Project Storm Fury, where they did more cloud seeding experiments on hurricanes. NOAA swore they would never do it again after this. In 1963, they started plasma seeding. And I like to call it plasma seeding because it's similar to cloud seeding. It's just done in space. They call that space weather modification. And so they had to come up with a better way to engineer a mousetrap, so they started using sounding rockets and creating artificial ion clouds in space. These ion clouds are made of barium and strontium. Now, this is something that's usually attributed to chemtrails, and that's because people don't know the 60-year history of dumping barium and strontium in space. The reason they do this, the ionosphere is invisible. You need a tracer element to see it. So they dump chemicals up there, they heat them with microwaves, and they can see it.
Well, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had been wishing for quite some time, in terms of years, that they had some way of slowing the trucks down in Vietnam. Our mission was to make it rain during the dry season. On that particular day, the clouds were very small. There just weren't any real big thunderstorms or anything like that. But I picked a cloud that was sitting out essentially by itself with a number of small clouds. I'm talking about clouds whose tops were somewhere near the freezing level, but not high enough to really grow. And I nurtured one of those clouds until it finally got it in well past the freezing level. And then the cloud developed a lot of convective activity, and it started sucking clouds into it, just building up and building up. And I took a series of pictures what I called for 41 minutes. By the end of 41 minutes, we had flown up to over 65,000 feet and we still couldn't reach the top of the cloud. So we knew we had a barn burner there. And by the next morning, we had washed out everything in the world and did a lot of damage to people and all that sort of thing. But it was a real success as far as blocking the roads off.
Environment.
Widespread disruption on the island, people trapped in mountainous areas. Heavy rain, which began on Friday, continues to inundate Taiwan.
The composition of a hurricane may have dozens of energy cells in it, and they're like the pistons in an engine. They just chug, chug, chug. They get stronger and stronger and stronger because they feed off the warm air below them. And they eventually turn into this thing they call a hurricane with all these energy cells in it. We know where those energy cells are. We know what makes them tick. We have the materials, if you will, to alter those energy cells and decrease the maximum surface winds in a hurricane. On August 18th in 1969, Hurricane Debbie was seeded 5 times at 2-hour intervals. And the maximum wind speeds had decreased from 115 to 80 miles per hour. That's a pretty remarkable reduction of more than 45% in damage reduction potential. The storm was left alone on the 19th, and on the 20th went back and seeded that cloud the second time and decreased the winds again to just under 100 miles per hour, or about 24% more damage reduction potential. There is so much damage done that the construction industry in general all over the United States benefits because the cost of material goes up. So the insurance company may or may not gain from having these damage reductions take place. As far as the energy industry is concerned, we all know that they get their money back almost immediately by increasing the price of their product. And it's not unheard of to believe that the actions performed by FEMA or the government is not a surefire way to buy votes. So there may not be any political or economic motivation on the government or some major industry's part to reduce the damages of hurricanes.
Vietnam is bracing for Typhoon Doksuri, touted to be the most powerful tropical cyclone to hit the Southeast Asian country in several years.
Operation Popeye, and basically the 54th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron used 3 planes to modify the weather over Vietnam for 5 years. So where are we today? We are now in what's called the blue gold rush. Fresh water has been dubbed blue gold in many publications, as potable water will be to this century what oil was to the last century. Cloud seeding is now big business. You can see right there, countries are spending millions to control the weather. Here's why. That article went viral way too fast, and they quickly renamed it to China is spending millions on modifying the weather for the Olympics, because the other article title was way too accurate. And in the bottom corner there, you can see that you can pay Oliver Travels Company 100,000, I believe that's euros, to get rid of the clouds on your wedding day. So weather modification is so common now, even travel companies.
Other governments are using weather control for many purposes. And Indonesia, for instance, Canada, Turkey, Greece, Russia, they're all using weather control to their benefit, and we aren't. Well, for several years, the Russians have had weather control product as one of their national goals. They're using weather control primarily to protect the large sites, or the sites where large numbers of people are congregating for celebration. So, such as in Moscow or Stalingrad, when they have these big events there, or parades, so forth, they bring their cloud seeding people in, and their objective is to keep it from raining or to knock the clouds down.